A reading from Psalm 46, verses 1 through 7. This is from the Living Bible. God is our refuge and strength, a tested help in times of trouble.
And so we need not fear, even if the world blows up and the mountains crumble into the sea.
Let the oceans roar and foam, let the mountains tremble.
There is a river of joy flowing through the city of our God, the sacred home of the God of all gods.
God himself is living in that city. Therefore it stands unmoved despite the turmoil everywhere. He will not delay his help.
The nations rant and rave in anger, but when God speaks, the earth melts in submission, and kingdoms totter into ruin.
The commander of the armies of heaven is here among us. He, the God of Jacob, has come to rescue us. Well, as you can see, I have entitled this morning's message, Good Grief. It is a common phrase of one of my favorite cartoon characters, Charlie Brown. So today, on this All Saints Sunday, it begs the question, is there such a thing as good grief? Is there a right way to do grief? Is there a wrong way? Well, the truth is that grief is not so much good or bad as it is healthy or unhealthy. It never feels good. And the fact is that no one goes through this life in this broken world in which we find ourselves living without experiencing loss. No one. Sorrow is a universal feeling. And grief, well, grief is the price we pay for the gift of love. It is a suffering that can, through compassion and empathy, bring us as a community closer together, which is why we have services like this. Or because of indifference or ignorance or feelings of awkwardness that can create distance and loneliness and isolate us even more. So this morning, I want to talk about two aspects of grief and loss. Two aspects. First, I want to talk about our personal experiences with grief, our own handling of it. And then secondly, I want to talk about our individual reactions to the grief and the sorrow of others and examine what does the Bible have to say about it. So I'm going to begin with a story. So I grew up in a town of about 1,200 people in the Holy Land of central Minnesota. My brothers, one from my father's first marriage to another woman and one from my mother's previous marriage to another man, were 18 and 17 years older than me. So I was raised as an only child. And my parents worked hard. They worked hard to give me everything a little girl could ever want or need. I was spoiled, but not bratty. That's my story, and I'm sticking with it. Spoiled, but not bratty. I had only four first cousins. There were two boys who lived in California who I'd never met, and then two girls who lived in the great state of Wisconsin. And the girls, Anita, who we called Pinky, was 4 years older than me, and Veronica, who was named after our grandmother, the one who was second only to the Pope in her devotion to the Roman Catholic Church and its faith. Well, we called her Ronnie, and she was 2 years older than I was. Now, Pinky and Ronnie's parents were divorced. Dad was never in the picture. And collectively, we referred to my cousins as the girls. They were the girls. And their mother, my Aunt Donna, was a high school English and drama teacher. And the three of us, we three cousins, we were all raised in the Roman Catholic faith. And I think we have a picture of the little girls when they were just little ones. Don't they look like little angels? Look at those little angels. That, at the very top, that's Pinky, and then the bottom it's Ronnie, and there they are, praying, of course, with the Catholic crucifix right there. Yeah, so cute. Yeah. Okay. They were the closest thing I had to sisters. And when we got together, we always had so much fun. Because there weren't any girls in my neighborhood. There were just boys. And boys, you know, what can you do with boys when you're a little girl? So we just had the best fun when we were together. Now, my mother was glamorous. My mother was beautiful, and she had a smile. She had a smile that could light up a room. The girl's mother, my Aunt Donna, well, I was always a little afraid of her. She rarely smiled. She always seemed kind of nervous and a bit stern. At least that's how she presented to my younger self. Maybe that's a totally unfair imagery, but that's how I saw her as a little girl. Now, as the spoiled but not bratty child of two adoring parents, I wanted for nothing. Mine was, by all accounts, a fairy tale childhood. When Dad wasn't working at our family restaurant, we would often go to the cities, you know, Minneapolis, St. Paul, and we'd go pick out a special place to eat, or maybe we'd take in the latest movie. We took family vacations, and when Disneyland in California first opened, my parents took me. I mean, I had it all. Truth be told, every little girl and boy should have a childhood like mine. And I am painfully aware that the overwhelming majority of children in this world do not. And that included the girls, because as a teacher, Aunt Donna didn't make a lot of money. So they didn't have a lot of fancy toys or clothes or family trips, except for 1 year. Now, way back when, in the olden days of yore, there was something called the World's Fair. Anybody remember this? The World's Fair? I got a few head nods there. And 1 year in particular, when I was 8 and Ronnie was 10 and Pinky was 12, the fair was going to be in Seattle, Washington. And their mom, my Aunt Donna, was going to drive there and take the girls to the fair for fun. And I think we have a photo of them when they were a little bit older. That's on Easter Sunday. There they are. Pinky's got her little Catholic missal in her hand, wearing their Easter bonnets. Oh, they were, yeah, cute as pie. Okay. Now remember, spoiled, but not bratty. Spoiled, but not bratty. I don't know why I wasn't going along, but I wasn't jealous. I wasn't sad or bitter or resentful. I was happy for them. I loved them. And I was so excited that they were finally going to be able to do something really, really fun. And the night before they left on their trip, they were at our grandmother's, Grandma Veronica, And my dad gave me $2 silver to give to the girls. Again, back in the day, this was a big, big deal. The last thing they asked me was what I wanted them to bring back for me. And I told them, no, Dad, your Uncle Stanley, he gave me that money to give to you. It's for you to spend on yourselves. I mean, they were sweet, and they were kind and innocent and generous of heart. But tragically, they never made it to the World's Fair. There was a terrible car accident. It was during a rainstorm, and their car hydroplaned. It was T-boned. It was a time before seatbelts. All 3 of them were ejected from the car and killed instantly upon impact. I will never forget the images of those 3 open caskets at the funeral home. Ronnie on the left, my Aunt Donna in the middle, and Pinky on the right. The image is burned into my memory. The girls lying there so still in their white dresses, looking like angels who are just simply sleeping. I will also never forget the fact that it was the first time I'd ever seen my father cry. Now, I don't tell you this story to garner your sympathy or your pity or your compassion. That's not why I told this story. I told this story to give an example of 3 very unholy ways that we respond to a story like this. One of the ways people might respond is that they think to themselves, well, that's too bad, but my sorrow and my loss is much, much greater and much deeper. Another one might think, well, my sorrow and my loss doesn't even begin to compare with that. And some people might think to themselves, well, for heaven's sakes, it's decades ago, just get over it and get on with it. But here's the thing. We are unique, and loss is unique. We are all made individually, specifically created by the same Creator, but all of us one of a kind. The psalmist says of God, your hands created me and made me what I am. And while grief is a natural response to loss, it is deeply personal. It is unique. It is as personal and unique as the relationship of one to another and the love and experiences that they share together. As such, we must never, never compare our loss to that of another. There is no hierarchy of grief and loss, just as there is no real end date to grief. One of the worst things people can say to someone is, you really should be over it by now. Are you kidding me? Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, one of the preeminent experts on grief and loss, put it this way: the reality is you will grieve forever. You will not get over the loss of a loved one. You'll learn to live with it. You will heal and you will rebuild yourself around the loss you have suffered. You will be whole again, but you will never be the same. Nor should you be the same, nor would you want to. And as writer and poet Donna Ashworth said, you don't just lose someone once. You lose them over and over, sometimes many times a day. When the loss momentarily forgotten creeps up and attacks you from behind, fresh waves of grief as the realization hits home. They are gone again. You don't just lose someone once, you lose them every time you open your eyes to a new dawn. And as you awaken, so does your memory. So does the jolting bolt of lightning that rips into your heart. They are gone again. Losing someone is a journey, not a one-off. There is no end to the loss. There is only a learned skill on how to stay afloat when it washes over you. So be kind to those who are sailing this stormy sea. They have a journey ahead of them and a daily shock to the system each time they realize they are gone again. You don't just lose someone once, you lose them every day for a lifetime. So bottom line, when it comes to experiencing grief and loss, sorrow is universal, but the pain is personal and the pain is unique. And that pain and that grief, it is not a sign of weakness, and it is surely not a sign of the lack of faith. It is simply the price that we pay for love. And the tears that we shed are simply love, signs of love with no place else to go. I love how the beloved character Winnie the Pooh put it. How lucky I am to have had someone in my life that makes saying goodbye so hard. And as believers, perhaps one of the most comforting truths upon which we can rely is the truth that we're never alone, even when we feel that we are. God's word promises that he's always with us. Psalm 34:18 says, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted. He rescues those whose spirits are crushed." A more modern translation from the Message, "If your heart is broken, you'll find God right there. If you're kicked in the gut, he'll help you catch your breath." And sudden, unexpected losses, well, that's exactly what they are. They're a punch to the gut. And they leave you like you simply cannot breathe. But the Lord God Almighty is always there. He is always there to help us through. He's always there to help fill our lungs back up with breath and work to repair our broken heart so that one day we can smile and laugh again when our loved one's name is mentioned without completely and totally falling apart. As we read earlier from Psalm 46, God is our refuge. God is our strength. He is a tested help in times of trouble. So when we're broken, when we are shattered, God is right there with us. He's right there for us to come to for strength. He's a safe hiding place that has been tested time after time after time. So when it comes to your individual experience with loss and grief, remember, don't compare. Don't compare your loss to others. Your loss and your grief is personal to you. There's no expiration date on it until that day, as Christians, when we meet up with our loved one again, when we all get to heaven. What a joyful day it will be. So let's talk now about our reactions to the grief and loss of others. What should we say? What should we do? Are there do's and don'ts to responding to another's suffering? What does the Bible show us? Well, most of you know that I love movies. And one of my all-time favorite movies is a little-known film made in 2007 starring Ryan Gosling. It's entitled Lars and the Real Girl. Anybody Anybody seen it? Lars and the Real Girl. We're going to play a trailer in a few minutes, but let me just set up the premise for you. Ryan Gosling's character, Lars, lives in a small Midwestern town where most folks attend the local Lutheran church, don't you know? And everyone knows everyone in this small town. Sounds familiar so far, right? That includes Lars and his family. And his family is comprised of his older brother and his brother's wife, Lars' sister-in-law. Now, Lars lives in a garage on his brother's land, which used to belong to their parents. But the parents are deceased, so the brother lives in the childhood home, but Lars, at his own choosing, lives in the garage. Again, everybody in town loves Lars and accepts that he's a bit different. He's a bit of a loner. He's somewhat socially awkward until that day he makes a new friend that he has named Bianca. So let's play the clip and make sure we got good volume.
Where's your girlfriend?
I don't have one.
Okay.
No.
What's the sun like? What's the sunshine?
That new girl's kind of cute, huh?
Something's going on with him. I'm worried.
Maybe he wants to be left alone.
That's not what he wants.
Hey, I have a visitor.
Where did you meet this person?
I met her on the internet.
Yeah, well, everybody's doing that now.
You know Bianca's a missionary?
I know, brother. He's crazy, right? He's crazy.
If I may, he appears to have a delusion.
What the hell is he doing with a delusion?
She loves kids.
Fantastic. When will it be over?
When he doesn't need it anymore.
We gotta fix him. Can you fix him?
Bianca's in town for a reason. This isn't necessarily a bad thing.
How can we help?
Go along with it.
This must be Bianca, but welcome.
It can be communication. It can be a way to work something out. Chances are he's been decompensating for some time.
We don't want anything to do with her.
What's the big deal?
She's a missionary. That's good, isn't it?
Hey, what are you doing on Friday? I was just thinking that maybe we could all go out.
Is she a sister?
We tried it when we couldn't talk.
Do you care?
Lars, do you care?
No.
That is just not true. Every person in this town bends over backwards to make Bianca feel at home. We do it for you.
How'd you know?
How do I know what?
That you were a man.
You grow up when you decide to do right. And not what's right for you, what's right for everybody, even when it hurts.
You're not gonna go to work today, Gus?
I won't be okay.
Well, Bianca could help you. You know, she has nurse's training.
To say that this is an offbeat, quirky kind of film is an understatement. But as I said, it's one of my favorite movies. Why? Well, as the doctor pointed out, Lars was suffering a delusion, born out of some kind of emotional need. So the folks of this little sweet, pretend little Midwestern town, they rally around Lars and Bianca, and they offer their support the best they know how. So you saw Bianca getting her hair done at the hairdresser, and she's at church, and then she's at the school reading to the children. Reading to the children. In other words, everyone goes along with this fantasy for Lars' sake. And as the doctor predicted, Lars eventually comes to the place where he no longer needs Bianca. And that brings up my favorite scene and the real reason that I bring up this whole movie. Eventually, much to everyone's surprise, Lars announces that Bianca is very sick. Very sick. And so the doctor is called and the doctor delivers the bad news. Nothing can be done. It's just a matter of time before Bianca is no more. And while he's home waiting, the ladies from the local Lutheran church show up at the door, complete with casseroles and hot dishes and Jell-O salads and the like. And well, Lars isn't sure just what he's supposed to be doing. But one of the little ladies says simply, "You don't need to do anything, Lars. Just be. This is what we do when someone we love is hurting. We just come and sit. This is what we do." And so she just sits down next to him and begins knitting. And they sit there with him as they wait for the doctor to finally come to deliver the tragic news that indeed Bianca is no more. And they have a service remembering Bianca, and as the movie unfolds, Lars goes on to find a real girl for companionship, hence the title, Lars and the Real Girl. How this sweet, pretend little community comes alongside of Lars in his time of loss is very biblical. And it gives us instruction on how to respond to another's loss. We saw it played out in the case of Job from the Old Testament. A few weeks ago, we talked about Job. We talked about his story that through no fault of his own, Job, once the richest man in the world, lost everything. His entire livelihood, 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 donkeys, 500 teams of oxen. He eventually, though, suffers the greatest loss of all, the loss of his children. 7 sons and 3 daughters, all of them gone in one heart-shattering, life-changing moment. So here's how his closest friends respond, at least initially, from Job 2:11 through 13. When 3 of Job's friends heard of the tragedy he had suffered, they got together, traveled from their homes to comfort and console him. Their names were Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite. When they saw Job from a distance, they scarcely recognized him. Wailing loudly, they tore their robes and threw dust into the air over their heads to show their grief. When they sat on the ground with him for 7 days and nights, no one said a word to Job, for they saw that his suffering was too great for words. Do you catch that last part? They sat on the ground with him for a full week, day in and day out, and no one said a word. Complete silence, because they saw that Job's suffering was simply too great for words. The truth is that when someone is suffering, sometimes the best thing to say is just say nothing at all. Just be there. Just be present. 90% of any ministry is simply showing up. And that includes ministering to those who are grieving. Just show up, come alongside of the other in situations of great loss and tragedy. Do just that, just show up. You don't need to say anything, you just need to be present. It's actually called the ministry of presence, of being present with and for someone in their time of need. Let them know by your presence that they are not alone, that they're part of a community, and that the burden they carry will be shared by others to the extent that that's possible. Just like the good Lutheran ladies with their casseroles and hot dishes and Jell-O salads did for Lars. They just came along and sat, because that is what we do. That's what Job's friends did. That's what God calls us to do, to show up and be present when someone is suffering and grieving. That's why it's so important to have celebration of life services, so that people can come and just show their care and concern by showing up for those who have been gutted to their core in their grief. There are no great speeches that are needed. There are no grand gestures you need to make. Just show up. Don't avoid them. Don't avoid the grief-stricken. Don't ignore them. Don't pretend that their loss never happened. And to that last point, I want to encourage you to make an effort to talk to the individuals who are grieving about the one that has died. Family and friends of those of loved ones who have died, they fear that their loved one might be forgotten. So keep their memory alive by asking and talking about them. And if they're not ready to talk about their loss, they'll tell you that. But the gift of remembering is such a huge biblical concept. God tells us to remember his commands. The thief on the cross asked Jesus to remember him when he comes into the kingdom of heaven. Paul says, remember me and the teachings that I have given to you. He says this in his closing letter to the church in Corinth. It pleases me that you continue to remember and honor me by keeping up the traditions of the faith I taught you. A beautiful and special way to honor those who are grieving and sorrowing is to ask about their loved one. So as many of you know, I serve part-time as a chaplain at Bethany in Waupaca. And one of the residents there, I'll call him George, that's not his real name. George's son, who I'll call Mark, and that's not his real name. Mark struggled with mental illness. And several months ago, he took his own life. And though I'm only there every 5 weeks, I make it a point that during my rotation, I go and I visit with George. Because he and his son, Mark, used to talk every day. And George is heartbroken. And he's lonesome for his boy. And so when I visit with George, I make a point of asking about Mark. Tell me what he was like as a child. What kind of things did you do together as a father and son? What did you talk about every day on the phone? And you know what? Every time I mention Mark's name, George's face lights up. And his sadness softens just a little bit. It's a simple act of kindness, but so profound. Practicing the ministry of presence and remembering. Don't avoid those who are grieving or ignore them or pretend to forget about their lost one who has gone on to be with Jesus. Maybe try and be a little bit more like Jesus with them. Jesus said, "Come to me, all who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest." Be that safe place. Be that safe harbor for someone to just land and rest in their time of grief when they are hurting. Show up, be present, help them remember the good times. Because the best is yet to come.